Module 2, Demographic Considerations, Projections, and Staffing Models. 1. Demographic considerations in educational planning. Educational systems are deeply affected by demographic patterns, the size, age structure, and growth rate of the population. In fact, understanding demographics is one of the most important parts of planning because population changes directly affect school enrollments, teacher demand, and infrastructure needs. Example: if a country's birth rate suddenly rises, there will be a surge in primary school enrollment within 5 to 6 years. This will require advanced planning to expand classrooms, hire more teachers, and procure additional learning materials. Why demographics matter in planning? Age distribution determines the number of school-age children. Urban versus rural population balance affects where schools are located. Migration patterns, both internal and cross-border, can suddenly increase or decrease school demand in specific areas. Fertility and mortality rates influence long-term education needs. 2. The use of target enrollment and intake ratios. Target enrollment ratios set clear objectives for what percentage of eligible children should be in school at each level of education. These ratios are important for setting measurable goals. Example: if a government sets a target that 95% of children aged 6 to 11 should be in primary school, planners can work backwards to determine how many new schools and teachers are needed to meet that goal. Intake ratios focus on the proportion of eligible children actually entering the first grade of a given level. For example, in secondary school, the intake ratio measures how many students who complete primary school move on to secondary. Practical application. In Botswana, careful monitoring of intake ratios allowed the government to see that although completion rates in primary school were high, intake into secondary school was lagging, prompting the creation of more secondary school facilities. 3. Wastage in education systems. Wastage refers to the loss of students from the education system before they complete a given level. This can happen through dropout or repetition. Dropout, when students permanently leave school before finishing a level. Repetition, when students repeat a grade, extending the time and resources needed for them to finish. Example: if a secondary school loses 20% of its students each year to drop out, this represents wasted investment in teacher time, textbooks, and facilities because those students did not reach the intended educational outcome. Reducing wastage. Successful strategies include improving teaching quality to keep students engaged, providing financial support to families in need, offering flexible schedules for working students. 4. Progression rates. Progression rates measure how effectively students move from one grade to the next without interruption. High progression rates indicate that most students are advancing as expected. Low progression rates may signal problems such as poor teaching quality, economic barriers, or inadequate facilities. Example: in a well-functioning education system, you might see 95% of grade 4 students moving to grade 5 the next year. If only 70% advance, planners need to investigate and address the barriers. 5. Projection of enrollment. Enrollment projection is one of the most technical and essential tasks in educational planning. Planners estimate the number of students who will be in each grade in the future, based on current trends and expected changes. Steps in projection. Collect historical data on enrollments, births, and population trends. Adjust for dropout, repetition, and migration. Apply target enrollment and intake ratios to estimate future numbers. Example: if projections show that grade 1 enrollment will increase by 20% over the next 5 years, planners can prepare by building additional classrooms and hiring more teachers. 6. Projection of demand. While enrollment projections focus on students, demand projections estimate the total resources required to meet those enrollments: teachers, classrooms, textbooks, and funding. Example: if projections show an increase of 50,000 students over the next decade, the demand projection might specify 1,500 additional teachers, 1,000 new classrooms, corresponding increase in the education budget. 7. Planning the teaching force. Teachers are the backbone of any education system. Planning for the teaching force involves not only determining the number of teachers required, but also ensuring they are properly trained, equitably distributed, and fairly compensated. Key considerations. Quantity. how many teachers are needed for projected enrollments? Quality, what qualifications and skills they should have. Deployment, ensuring rural and disadvantaged areas are adequately staffed. Retention, reducing teacher turnover through fair pay, professional development, and good working conditions. Example. In Ghana, planning the teaching force involved the policy to recruit teachers from rural areas and train them locally, increasing the likelihood they would remain in their home communities. 8. Projection of teacher supply. Projection of supply ensures that the teacher training pipeline matches future needs. If not enough teachers are being trained, shortages will occur. If too many are trained, unemployment and wasted resources may result. Example. If projections show that 5,000 teachers will retire in the next decade, the teacher training system must produce at least that many, plus additional teachers for expanding enrollments. 9. Designing staffing models for schools. Staffing models determine how many teachers, administrators, and support staff a school should have, based on its size and needs. Basic steps. Determine student numbers and class sizes. Assign subject specialist or generalist depending on the grade level. Include administrative and support roles such as principals, librarians, and guidance counselors. Adjust for special programs such as inclusive education, language instruction, or vocational training. Example. A staffing model for a 500-student secondary school might include 20 subject teachers, 1 principal and 2 vice principals, 1 librarian, 2 guidance counselors, administrative and maintenance staff. Well-designed staffing models help ensure schools are neither overstaffed, wasting resources, nor understaffed, compromising education quality. In this second module, we have looked at demographic factors that influence education planning, explored target enrollment and intake ratios, discussed wastage and progression rates, learned about enrollment and demand projections, examined teacher force planning and staffing models.